Hey guys, playing around with making a frame, lower section of frame for this, and kind of plan on using, the 1.5 by 1.5 for the bottom section of frame, and kind of just figuring out, how this is gonna have to go, for this tire to clear when it turns and stuff, and looks like I'm gonna need like some 1.5 or 2 by 1.5 wide, that's cut to a 45, and I ended up using my miter saw to cut the 1.5 by 1.5 because the little saw can't do a 45 on the 1.5. But last night I was actually kind of thinking about putting front suspension in this thing, and I have the four-wheeler 300EX. There's things about this thing that I never really showed you guys, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a washer welded in here, and same way with the other side. And also, I had to fix that crack in the frame. For those of you that watched a video on this bike and that one, I was kind of working on, I was going to build 2 of them, and after I cleaned this frame all up and I actually didn't see that until I was cleaning it up, and after I painted it I was seeing the crack in the frame right there. But kind of thinking about using this front end on that go-kart. Just cut the front end out of it, and there's some benefits to it, which would be I'd be using these hubs, not 300EX hubs, but these hubs, and they add a little bit more width to it because the wheel would normally bolt up somewhere around here on the original hubs. So I'm gaining some hubs, gaining some rotors, and those brake calipers that I showed you in the other video about making back brakes using one of the brake calipers. Those brake calipers bolt right up to these. So my brake system's almost complete with just using this front end. And these are most rear bolt pattern. This is 4 on 110. And I have some Bayou wheels, front runners, that are 4 on 110. So I got wheels and tires. The ball joint, I ended up switching this ball joint right here out to the same one I'm using for the upper, which is a Corvette, late 70s Corvette tie rod end. I ended up using a Corvette one on upper and lower in order to get this thing so that it's going to be straight. Right now it's turned a little bit and it needs fine-tuned, but now measuring from here, now the back end of that go-kart is set up to be 4 foot wide. Measuring from here to the outer edge, it's like 23 inches, so it's an inch shy of being 4 foot total in width. And I do have these 1-inch spacers. I could possibly put those on so that it is 4 foot. Most typically you want narrower in the back than you do the front, especially on a posi rear end, but I was aiming towards making it so it was the same front and back. But the thing of it is, I don't want this thing to end up being 10 foot long, but anyways, I'm kind of looking at okay, these tires here are about the same around as the tires I was going to use as NTD tires. So I got to figuring that I needed 4 inches. And I go back to the frame. I need to put these 4-inch things in here to make it so that these tires can miss the frame when it turns. So you go back to the 300EX frame, You know, figure it needs to be about, you know, because divide that box that's in the center of that axle out there. You know, I need to make about 5 inches from the center of this system back, at least, and these tires should clear just like the other ones does. I'm kind of thinking of just being kind of generic, just cut it off right here, and then you know, the rest of it I'll just cut it off, leave an extra on it, you know, so that way when I go to tie it into the rest of the frame, it can be done. It's almost going to be making this thing like a side-by-side, full suspension and, you know, 2-seater and stuff, but I don't want it to sit as high as what the yard truck thing is. I want it so you can sit down in it further, so it does add length to it, and it kind of just goes with the frame that I already have made. You know, this is kind of set up so you're gonna have to be setting off the surface of the frame a certain amount, but not as high as a UTV would be. But, I don't know, I'm just real nervous about going in there and cutting that frame up and ended up just screwing myself out of that unit. But I don't know, tell me what you guys think. Okay, I was thinking about another thing I could do with this axle if I don't, you know, use it in here, is that I have a trailer out there, and it originally was 4 foot wide by 6 foot long, and it was like made for a lawn tractor or one 4-wheeler. And I've been thinking about removing the axle out of it and building another trailer, you know, from scratch, just using the axle, and I'd have to lengthen the axle to make, but I want a 5 foot wide by 8 or 10 foot long trailer. So I could use this axle here, and it'd just be for yard purposes. But, you know, I hook that trailer to a 4-wheeler or something like that and pull it around the yard. But I could use this axle, even though it turns. All I got to do is just make metal rod or metal like tie rods. You know, put a bolt through here and then weld this to the center of the frame somewhere to, you know, hold it straight, or actually just use tie rod ends so I can adjust it so it's straight or whatever. But, you know, I could use this axle in there, and it would make it so I still have use of that trailer as a yard only thing, but, you know, and get use of, you know, what I made here